Good morning and welcome to Fireman's Hall Museum of Philadelphia. We are here today to commemorate an event that took place 45 years ago this morning. As you know, the Philadelphia Fire Department has a long and rich history, but the Gulf Oil Refinery fire stands alone in the amount of resources dispatched, challenges faced by firefighters, and unfortunately, the amount of members lost from the events of that fateful day. Early on the morning of Sunday, August 17th, 1975, at 6 a.m., a seagoing tanker was offloading crude oil at the Gulf Oil Refinery when accumulated hydrocarbon vapors ignited suddenly, starting a fire that threatened 600 storage tanks at the refinery tank farm. This incident caused an 11-alarm fire, with about 600 firefighters and about 75% of the fire department's resources. Fire engulfed the Gulf Oil Refinery in South Philly. The intense flames and smoke casted an eerie shadow over the city. Tragically, 6 Philadelphia firefighters were killed at the fire, and 9 others were injured, along with 4 Gulf firefighters. 2 of the injured Philadelphia firefighters died of their injuries several days later. The fire was finally put under control on Monday, August 18th at 5:38 a.m. Today, on this 45th year anniversary of this event, we would like to remember and honor the fallen 8 firefighters who died in the line of duty, making the ultimate sacrifice. They are firefighter John J. Andrews, 49 years old, of Engine 49. He was a 20-year veteran and recently received his 20-year service ring. He was survived by his wife and 2 children. Firefighter Ralph J. Campana, 41 years old, of Ladder 19. He was a 13-year veteran, and before becoming a firefighter, Firefighter Campana spent 9 years in the Navy and Air Force, serving in Korea and twice going around the world. He was survived by his wife and 4 children. Firefighter Robert J. Fisher, 43 years old, of Engine 33. He was an 18-year veteran and was survived by his wife and 5 children. Firefighter Hugh McIntyre, 52 years old, of Engine 56. He was a 20-year veteran. He was survived by his wife and his daughter. Firefighter Roger T. Parker, Jr., 28 years old, of Ladder 27. He was a 6-year veteran. He joined the fire department after being discharged from the Army. He was among 5 members of his company who were awarded bravery citations on July 2nd, 1975, by Fire Commissioner Joseph R. Rizzo. He was survived by his wife and 2 children. Firefighter Joseph R. Wiley, 33 years old, of Ladder 27. He was appointed to the fire department in 1969. He served as an Army enlisted man in Korea. He was survived by his wife and son. Lieutenant James Pouliot, 35 years old, of Engine 20. He died on August 26 at St. Agnes Burn Center. He served in the Navy from 1959 to 1961 and joined the fire department in 1963. He was promoted to the rank of lieutenant in February of 1974. He was survived by his wife and 4 children. Firefighter Carol K. Bruneck, 33 years old, from Engine 57. He was an 11-year veteran. He died on August 31st at St. Agnes Burn Center. He was survived by his wife and 2 children. Plaques honoring the firefighters who died as a result of the refinery fire were placed in front of Fireman's Hall Museum in Philadelphia in August 2007. The plaques placed in front of the Firefighters Hall are an ongoing series of memorials to be placed honoring the 297 members of the Philadelphia Fire Department who have died in the line of duty since 1871. The plaques are placed on sidewalks in the city or as near as possible to the locations where the firefighters died. Joining me today in honoring these fallen firefighters are retired Deputy Chief Robert J. Marcusella, retired Captain Robert Higgins, and retired firefighter curator Henry J. McGee, who were all present and involved on the fire grounds in stabilizing and extinguishing the fire. They will give us their detailed accounts that happened on that day and how this event has affected them during their career. The moderator for this panel will be anchor reporter and journalist Terry Ruggles from NBC 10 News.
Robin, of who was where the night that it happened, and will subsequently get into the days that evolved afterwards. But Deputy Chief Bob Marcusella, where were you that night before, and when did you get there?
I went there early that morning with Engine 24. The fire came in on the C shift. We relieved on the fire ground, went there that morning. Our water cannon, we call a stand gun, had a pretty good position and it could stay unmanned. So they sent us back to our firehouse at 20th and Federal. So we ran from our firehouse all day. At about 4:30 or so, we got a vacant dwelling fire on Alter Street in South Philly. And just as we were taking our equipment up, the flash fire occurred. So we were dispatched immediately back to the fire. We jumped on the fire truck, and us and Ladder 11 were the two companies that arrived back on scene first.
Well, do me a favor now, Bob. Set the scene for me. When you get there the first time what's burning, you go back to the firehouse, you answer another call, you get the second call. So give me what you saw the first time and then what you saw the second time.
The first time, it looked like it was contained. It was just some flames shooting out atop of tank 231, which was the tank that was on fire. Our gun was protecting the tank north of 231. I saw Ralph Campana that morning, who was a good friend of mine, and he kind of like looked right through me, which I felt was odd because that wasn't Ralph. Ralph was a very humorous guy, a lot of fun to be around. And a couple times I tried to engage him and kid around with him, and he kind of like looked right through me both times. We went back to the firehouse. We had the vacant fire, the vacant fire. And when it flashed, I was coming out of the basement, and our senior man, John Buggy, yanked me out and said, "Let's go. The refinery just lit up." Now, when we got back, it was night and day. Now there were flames everywhere. There was a wall of fire.
Out of one tank or two tanks?
We couldn't see it. It's still the whole area around 231 where the oil was underneath the foam was on fire. And that's where the firefighters were trapped. And we didn't have any of our heavier hose line left, or 3.5, so we used 2.5 and an old hose pipe called the New York hose pipe. And we were told to protect the tank north of 231 again, but without our water cannon, which was now our 3.5-inch line was right under the flames. So we stretched our 2.5, and the first thing we did was climbed over a dike and waded into foam and oil that was basically up to our waist.
But to the layman who's watching, your mission was preventative rather than putting out the tank that was burning. You were trying to prevent the other tanks from catching fire or exploding.
Yes, that's kind of like the strategy at these big fires.
Yeah.
You really need a lot of foam and the way to apply it to get those big tank fires out.
All right, one more question before I move over to Bob Higgins. It's my understanding that Gulf had its own fire department, or at least some kind of adjunct unit. Is that the case? And if it was, were they on the scene when you got there, and what were they doing?
Yes, that was the case. And when we got there, it was chaos. They always said, when I worked South Philly my whole career, when you see the men in the white hats running, the refinery workers run. But I couldn't even see any of them running. It was just, the command structure was knocked out. I mean, I was surprised that we got any orders to protect that tank.
Who was in charge of the fire grounds at that time? Was it Gulf or was it the city?
Oh, the city. The city takes control of big fires. Like
So
that.
as soon as you come through the gates, you're in charge.
Yes, not us. Joe Rizzo was still there.
No, I
Joe
understand.
Rizzo was still running the fire.
I understand, but it was the city's responsibility as soon as you went through the gates.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, Bob Higgins, where were you? Some of those same questions. What did you see and what did you do when you got to the fire grounds? Whoop, Bob, your mute's, hit your mute because you're off there a little bit. You got it? No, still not hearing you. At least I'm not hearing you. Anybody else hearing him?
No, I see he's got 3 microphones are muted. Brian?
Bob, you got to hit your mute button there sometime over on the left side. All right, he needs an expert to come in from beside the scene there. There we go. Try it again, Bob.
Can you hear me?
I can now. Did you hear my question? Is the same thing you was asking Bob?
Yes.
What preceded you when you got there and what happened?
Okay. That morning, August 17th, I was assigned to Engine Company 33 in Bridesburg. I knew on the way to work that we were going to the fire ground because due to the fact they had a foam pumper in that station, that I know that they make all the refinery fires. So upon getting to the station, I met my platoon, Platoon D, and we went with a police van to the fire ground. We relieved the C platoon on the fire ground.
Let me interrupt because how long had the fire been burning when you get the call to go with the foamer?
Well, the fire started around 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
So they were there already 4 hours. Okay. And like I said, we were the relief company. We were relieving the C platoon. So when we got down there, we were ordered by the chief on the fire ground to man engine 133, which is a foam pumper. Okay. And it was directly in front of tank 231, directing water and foam onto that fire. All day that day. Now it was a Sunday. The weather was hot. It was a hot day, a little overcast. We worked all day putting foam on tank 231. Now, approximately, say, 12 o'clock, we started to receive foam from the National Foam Company. They sent a tractor trailer up with 55-gallon drums on it, and we had teams of 4 men rolling those drums up to the side of 133 to put into our apparatus and put on 231.
All right, let's stop, Bob. Let's stop here a minute and explain to the person at home who may not be a professional firefighter why you're using foam rather than water and how it's applied.
Well, it's applied with use of water. It's like bubbles. And what we want to do is we want to smother the fire. So that was our job that day, was to try to smother this fire.
So you're taking away the oxygen.
Taking the oxygen out of the fire. Yeah, out of the triangle. Taking the oxygen out of the triangle.
Okay, and how successful was that going when you got there and as you went through the day?
Not good at all. It seemed like we were fighting our own fire here. It wouldn't flare up, but it wouldn't get any better. So we were there all day, and there were monitors in the front of our apparatus that were also applying water. Okay, so we had many hose lines on this fire, the original fire, 231. Around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I had started sending my two of my men back, and I stayed. We went in teams. It was myself and the driver, which was firefighter Fisher, and my 2 other men. We would go back and they would take a break. Then they would come and relieve us, get some R&R, rest and rehabilitation. And then approximately 4:45, I went up on top of the apparatus and manned the turret on top of the apparatus, and my pump operator, firefighter Fisher, came up to me and he said, "Hey, Lieutenant, we are completely out of foam." I said, "All right, Bobby, don't worry about it. We're still going to play water on this fire." Okay. In the meantime, we're noticing the street is backing up with liquid, both foam covered and liquid under the foam. Okay, it's very noticeable because
Now, Bob, the liquid is a propellant that is under there. There's foam on top of a propellant that's under.
That is correct. That is correct. And there's a reason why I'm going this way with this. The chiefs we went to mention about this height to come up, they came up with 4 or 5 different plans. One was to put engine 133 up on ramps. Another one was to put plywood in front of it and dike it away. Another one was to put an 1.5 inch water line under the apparatus. They all tried, everything was tried that could be tried. They even put 2 pumpers at the end of the street to siphon liquid out of the street and to put it in a diked area to lower this liquid that's in the street. So then around 4:45, I'm on top of the apparatus. My driver's working the pump panel. The piece moves. And when I say it moved, it jolted. It's sort of like it got hit with a blast of heavy wind. And next thing I know, my driver's running down the street, burning from top to bottom. He's in a vapor cloud of fire. Every place he broke the blanket, it lit up in the street. And I immediately jumped off the top of the apparatus, figuring I'm going to get hurt or break a leg or something, but I still got to get down to him. When I started to go to the back step of the 133, a chief grabbed me. He said, "Get out of here and grab everybody you can and get out of here. The street is lighting up." Okay. Now, when I mentioned before, you mentioned the liquid under the foam. Realize this, that this foam or this liquid wasn't burning from tank 231 to the back step of engine 133. That fire was from the bumper of 133 back down the street. So the original liquid that was coming out of this tank wasn't because I would have caught fire when I jumped off the top of the piece. Okay. And like I said, this area in the back of the piece, anybody.
This is a little confusing there. A little confusing here. Are you saying it was a different source or a leak from the same tank coming in another way?
I'll tell you what it was. And when this original fire came in, the explosion blew out the electrical system in the field, in the field.
Right.
Okay. So now the pumps are down. The pumps are down that would actually take the liquid out of the street and take it and put it in a dike. Okay. So when that breaks down, that's when they decided to put the 2 pumpers, engine 16 and engine 40, at the end of the street. That was supposed to take off this excess fluid and water. Now, I was told after the fact that what happened was this liquid went back into the sewer system, and when it came up, it drew naphtha up the street. Okay, very volatile liquid, naphtha. Okay, and that's what they think caused the second flash. Okay, there were men in the streets. It looked like they were diving back and forth trying to get back to a safe area. But
now, what happened to your man? I don't mean to keep interrupting you, but what happened?
When I got to the back step, he took one dive into the liquid to put himself out, and when he came up, he was burning twice as hard. And then he dove in again. I never seen him after that.
He was one of the 8?
He was one of the 8. Yes, he was. Yes, he was.
Harry, I'm going to get to you in a minute here, but I wanted to go back to the deputy chief. Bob here has given us what he's doing in his spot, and obviously all hell is breaking loose. From your vantage point as a commander, are you close to this, or are you at a distance kind of overlooking the troops? Where are you and what are you seeing?
Well, at that time, I was a firefighter. I had not even made lieutenant yet. So I wasn't a chief officer.
Okay, well, good perspective. Okay, thank you for bringing us around. Okay. So where are you and what are you seeing?
When we came in, we went right back to where we left our hose connected to the hydrant, which was near the HF unit, where the incident just happened.
Yeah.
And all I could see was flames. From what Bob was saying, I mean, the oil, the naphtha, was underneath the foam. And so it was a much larger fire. Instead of just one area at the top of the tank that was burning in the morning, the entire area of 4th Street and Avenue Y was on fire. I mean, really serious flames. I'm talking about going as high as the top of the Penrose, the Platte Bridge.
How long, Bob, is this after the first alarm's called in? Are we talking 36 hours?
The first alarm came in about 4 o'clock in the morning, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was 12 hours later when we went back, almost 13 hours later.
Okay. Harry McGee, you bring an interesting perspective to this because you were a firefighter to be, but you weren't actually a firefighter there, but you were there, and I think your dad was there too, was he not?
I was stationed at Engine 9. Okay, I was in the job. I just a little less than 2 years in the job, and my dad and myself and my 2 brothers were in the second alarmers. And he came over and said to me, I was off. I was on the A platoon. He came over and said to me that they needed the second alarmers truck down at the refinery. So, I said, okay, so I'll go down with you. And from my perspective, when we went inside, first of all, it was a time when we brought the truck up, they started to take their coats off and they were having something to drink and stuff like that, some of the firemen. And I decided that I would take a look around because I wasn't super comfortable with where I was and what I didn't know about. And I was walking up the side of the street. We weren't inside the refinery. Well, we were, but it was on Pennypack Street, I think. So what happened is, as I was walking up the street and I was just looking from right to left and trying to get some kind of bearing of where I was. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw a flash. And as soon as I saw that, I just went like this with my head. And as I turned my head, it was a wall of fire that just took everything in its way. And, there was a chief there. I think it was car 4. There were 55-gallon drums that were blowing up, I think, over near where he was. But what I saw as I started to turn around was that the people were on fire. The firefighters that were in the foam were on fire. They dipped themselves underneath it, and they came back up, and like Bob said, that they were all on fire. Because
they didn't know the naphtha was there? Is that the point?
No, they didn't know the naphtha was underneath. So it was probably the worst thing that could have been done. But I don't know that they had another avenue anyway.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what we did is, I started running. I didn't have any gear on or anything else. And just like the chief said, you looked to the left as you were going up and, flames were going down the different avenues and stuff like that. And I said to myself, I didn't know really how they were going to stop it. That's what it looked like to me. It just looked like it was going crazy. So,
now, is your dad on the fire site too, Harry?
Pardon?
Was your dad on the fire site too, and with the second alarmers? Or
he wasn't a fireman, but he was with the second alarmer. So as I started to run, I thought, and I stopped and I thought a minute, and I said, geez. I says, where's Dad? And I turned around to go, and this car passed me real quick, and he hollered outside the car. It was a car that must have been parked down that way. And what happened is he said to me, people jumped in the back seat of the car without even pulling the seat forward, and they went up the top of the road. And off to my left was like the fire administration building. And, of course, that was, eventually well involved in fire. And, the two of the top men from the refinery had heart attacks when this thing happened. They took them to the hospital. They had heart attacks. And I know that the commissioner called for additional help. And then, they usually give the preliminary beeps and stuff like that. And he said, just stop the beeping. He said, anybody that was here, get them back here. Get them all back here. And like Bob said, they had tractor trailers coming in with foam, and it was pretty crazy.
Let's talk about conditions, because I remember that evening. I was coming back from Ocean City, New Jersey. It was a Sunday night. My wife and I come across the Walt Whitman Bridge, and of course, right in front of us, it's all aglow, that's going on. So it was a hot evening. It was the heart of summertime. What were we've already talked about kind of fire conditions, but for anyone who wants to chime in on this, you all have bunker gear on this kind of thing. How many pounds of water are you losing, and who needs salt pills, and what are the physical conditions? Bob, Deputy Commissioner, let's start with you, and then we'll go to Bob, Captain.
You got promoted, Bob.
Thanks for the promotion.
Well, Deputy Chief, I beg your pardon. I'm a civilian, you guys. I just played this on TV.
Well, we didn't have bunker gear back then. It was the old longer coats and the rubber boots, the boots up to our waist. And it was hot. I mean, but that was the last thing I think that was on any of our minds. I mean, we knew our brothers were trapped in there. And I remember it being hot, humid, and sticky, and I remember the smell of the foam and the oil. That sticks with me. I mean, every time I went to a refinery since then, it was like a flashback to that day. The second alarmers, was outstanding, as usual. I remember Melrose sent some meals over later on. We were due to get done at 6 o'clock that night. I didn't get home till 11 o'clock. And that was before there were cell phones. So there was no way to let your family know. My family was in South Philly, and they knew that there was firemen missing. And there was one firefighter who was at Engine 10. He was on another shift. And he came and he took people's names. And he went out to a payphone with a pocket full of dimes back then. And he called a lot of people's families to let them know that they were okay, which I thought was a very, very nice thing to do. So people did their part in so many different ways to try to make it less of a tragedy.
Yeah.
And the first thing we did, like I said, is we went waist deep into the foam and oil again. And we were in there, and our stream was hitting the tank north of 231. And the scary part is I only had 2 years on the fire department. And I looked at that stream, and as it's hitting the stream, it's evaporating. It's boiling off as it's hitting the tank. And I knew that wasn't good. And I looked at the lieutenant for reassurance, and he looked as worried as I was. And I looked at the senior man for reassurance, and he looked as worried as I was. And that's when I really got scared. And then a chief officer came, and I don't remember who it was, but in so many words, he said, "Get the heck out of there." And our stream wasn't reaching, so we were right up next to the tank. And our lieutenant said, "We won't reach from back there." And he said, "I said, get out of there. We just lost firefighters on the other side." In the flash, he says, "There's oil under that foam."
Bob Higgins, your thoughts on the conditions? Same question.
Conditions of the men were beat. This was 4:45 in the afternoon. We had been working all day, not only with the heat, but with walking through this liquid in the streets. And once in a while, realize something. We had hose lines under this foam and under this liquid. And of course, you didn't know it was there. You took a header, you went into the liquid. Okay, we drug you out, we brought you inside. Second alarmers were there, Red Cross was there. They were great. They wiped guys' eyes out. They had to clean their eyes out because the stuff was in their eyes. And like you said, this is way before the actual disaster happened. This is all day of working conditions. They just stayed the same. They never got better, but they only got a little worse as this fluid started to go up. Now, when I mentioned the fluid before, I got to mention this. The outcome of this investigation, the outcome that I know of, was that the manifold on the apparatus I was sitting on caused that flash, the second flash. What happened was that manifold got hot underneath, okay? It broke down the foam that was under there because we're sitting right in the middle of the street. And when it did, it ignited the naphtha. And that's
So this is like a car muffler that would set
Exactly.
the leaves on fire.
Exactly, right.
Well, I was going to get to that as far as cause goes, but before I do, I wanted to ask, we lost 8 firefighters.
Yes.
Did they all go at the same time? Was it one event that took them, or were there 2 or 3 explosions that did the damage?
The one explosion took all 8 out. Like I said, if you look through the fire, which you can look through the fire from my position on the ground in the front of engine 133, you've seen firefighters diving to get back to the grass plot where this administration building was to get out and get put out. But my own opinion, 2 firefighters were critically burned and eventually passed. Okay, I believe it was K Bruneck and I believe it was Lieutenant Jim's pool yacht. Okay, they got out. They got them out. They put them out. They took them. I wasn't on that side of the fire, but as in talk goes on, they were so hot when they put them out that they reignited with this liquid on.
Oh my God.
So they were both taken to St. Agnes where they passed 7 to 10 days later. But the 6 original firefighters, they died with that blast that came from the back of that apparatus.
My goodness. All right. My other question before I asked that one was, in the after action report, what was the cause of the initial fire?
That came to be, I believe, the muffler of engine 133 heated the street and then ignited the liquid.
But
go ahead.
Let me interrupt, sir, because they were there answering an initial fire. What caused the initial fire?
The first?
Yes.
That was it. That might have been lightning. I don't even remember when that was. Is that right, Bob?
Bob, Deputy Chief.
It was a tanker offloading crude.
That's it. Okay.
That's
right. Right.
And Neptune, and the 2 guys fell asleep.
That's it. There you go. There it goes.
Bob, explain that more. There were 2 guys fell asleep. Flush that out for me.
The 2 guys that were pumping the oil from the ship to the tank, 231, fell asleep. The oil level rose, pushed vapors out of the vents, and the vapors found an ignition source and flashed back to the tank. And then the alarm was sounded.
Well, I got there the morning after. I was coming back from Ocean City, as I said, and I met Commissioner Rizzo up on the top of the Penrose there, looking down on that Gulf Administration building, which was just a shell of itself.
Right.
Now, how quickly did it take that fire to get over there? Anyone can answer this question, but that was some distance away from the initial tank, was it not?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. And in the middle of that building, there was a horseshoe area. Okay, it was a horseshoe area. Now, that was part of the street. Which happened was the fluid did go up that horseshoe area. It would be like a turnaround for a truck or a car.
Got it.
And we were taking breaks up past that on the outside, getting second alarmers with lime juice and things like that there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what happened and how long it took for that building to catch fire, when I got around to the staging area, I was out of it. I was pretty much out of it. I was told that I was the top on the list for being lost. Okay, because the last time they saw me was on top of that apparatus. Okay, so what happened to that building? I mean, I know it burnt down. When it burnt down or anything, maybe Chief can answer it. Maybe Harry could answer it.
Let's go past this because we have 10 pounds to put in a 2-pound bag here tonight.
Okay, go ahead.
This is a whole lot of information about something that certainly is significant. But we lost these 8 people. Did any of you know them or know them well? And we can answer in any round here. Deputy Chief, your thoughts. Did you know anyone who perished?
I knew Ralph the best, Ralph Campana, and Parker and Wiley were in the battalion, and so was Andrews. Ironically, we would play softball the entire summer before that happened, and we used Gulf's field.
No kidding.
So,
Wow.
and I could still picture Ralph. He used to throw me these crazy curveballs during warm-up, and they'd break like a foot away from me. And I could picture Ralph doing that just to make me laugh, with the flair of the refinery behind him.
Yeah. Bob
Yeah.
Higgins, your thoughts? Anybody?
Yeah, John Andrews, when I came out of fire school in June of 1969, I was assigned to 13th and Shunk in South Philly. John Andrews was my senior man. He taught me what the fire department. Wiley and Wiley, Chief, who was the other guy that was in ladder 27?
Parker.
You mentioned him. Who was it?
Roger Parker.
Parker. I had worked the sea platoon, so needless to say, I knew both of them. Realized on Friday, the 5th, I was as an officer when this happened. Okay. And for me, it was just the congratulations day. Guys that I knew from South Philly, that I had worked with in South Philly, they were patting me on the back and everything else. So to me, this was hard. You know, this whole thing, as hard as it was actually hard, seemed to be harder for me.
Trying to say, Harry McGee, your job as a curator over at the museum, do you know more about these 8 fallen than the average person might?
I can't say, to be honest with you, that I have everybody's name memorized, but I had over the years what to me was very good, because I had time to interact with a lot of the families and people that came in that actually lost members in the fire department. And of course, you know, they're like class 1 families, you know what I'm saying? You take care of them the best because they're your brothers and, you know, that kind of thing. I actually had through that also had a relationship with Crozer Chester Hospital. Doctors came down and they called me for questions and stuff. And we had books upstairs that were, you know, that we put together and stuff like that. You know, this was over the years that I'm talking about. And one time we had a big affair at the museum, and I had 5 people from the burn center up on the 3rd floor showing them the books and stuff. And they said, we learned so much from the people that were hurt and were burned in this job. But for me, and to me personally, it was very, Bob, we're all firemen here. So to me, I had a very difficult time with this whole thing.
Well, I was going to move to that next, and I know in the Army, I used to have to go out and tell families that their sons or daughters were killed in Vietnam. It was called notification duty.
Sure.
And it's the hardest thing I ever had to do, ever. But the same thing holds true if you're a deputy chief or a lieutenant or, just someone in command. It's a tough thing. What kind of psychological effect does it have on you? And maybe that's a personal question you don't want to answer, but how does this play on your soul? Bob, deputy chief first.
I guess there was a certain amount of survivor's guilt, because before I went to Engine 24, I mean, it's just kismet of who was where that day. Before I went to Engine 24, I was at Ladder 19, and I was supposed to go on the D platoon, which was at the fire, with Ralph. And if our gun didn't have a good position that morning, we would have been there, and I'm sure I'd have been with Ralph.
Yeah.
So there was a certain amount of survivor's guilt. I only had 2 years on a job. It was horrific for me, because that's the first I seen up close and personal that people I knew could die on the line of duty. I mean, when I was in fire school, my last week in fire school, we lost 2 firefighters at the Levy Inc. fire. And that was kind of like an eye opener. But then here I am 2 years later at the Gulf fire. And actually losing firefighters that I knew. And I can only imagine what Bob Higgins went through, you know.
Well, that was going to be my question to Bob Higgins. Is here you are an officer, albeit a fresh plebe, you know, like kind of Lieutenant Fuzz there, so to speak. But how do you deal with your men with a situation like that?
Well, basically, like I said, I never really, you know, I had 6 years on the job when this fire happened. Okay. And basically I had never, and hope that never see it again, but it showed me how fragile that our job was and how easily we could be taken away. I mean, these are eye-opening things. Okay. And like I said, I put another 32 years in after this. And I retired as a rank of captain. And I made a promise to myself that this was not going to happen again to any of my men. And I thank God I kept it. But there's a lot of prayers going on, because it's bad enough losing 8 firefighters, but losing the guy that you're in charge of, that you're supposed to take care of, that you're supposed to bring home at night, that's really a killer.
Well, Brian Anderson is with us, and Brian wasn't there for the fire. He's a relatively new fireman, given the audience that we have this evening on our Zoomcast. But Brian, let me ask you these 2 questions. One, when you were in the academy, is this a fire you learned about and talked about? And 2, a fire like this with loss of life, how does it act as a motivator or an educator to you to do your job?
Sure. When I was in the academy, it's a tradition for the cadets every morning when you have formation and you salute the flag, the names of all of the fallen firefighters from 1871 until present are read. And you start to hear those names every day. And there's a story that goes with those names, and you start to find out different things about the different events that happen. And it's they do that for the purpose to tell you that as much as we love mastering our craft and want to do this job, there is an ultimate sacrifice that is made sometimes in doing that and protecting people. And it hits home real quick. And I have experienced either been on the fire ground or listening to the fire ground when quite a few firefighters have died these last couple of years, especially with me coming on now in October will be my 5th year that I've been now the curator of Fireman's Hall Museum, listening to the death of Matt LaTurner on the radio, and it definitely hits home, and it makes a lot of things go through your mind, you know, especially if you know the person personally. You know, if you were there, could you have made a difference? What went wrong? You know, and you think about things like that.
Well, let's wrap this up with some final reflections on what happened then and what's happened subsequently, either in the fire department or your lives as individual firefighters or just human beings. So, Deputy Chief, your thoughts on what happened and what it meant to you.
Well, I eventually, you know, wound up in the field of hazardous materials within the department. And that fire was one of the motivators for me to learn as much as I can about the properties of hazardous materials to make sure that something like that would never happen again. You need 3 things for a combustible liquid to take off: vapors, flammable range, and ignition temperature. And obviously, you know, those 3 things were all present that day. So I just really applied myself to the field of hazardous materials, and most people in the department kind of know me as Hazmat Bob, because I mean, that's where I spent a large period of my time.
So if anything, in one way, at least this was a motivator for your expertise as you went on in the fire department, your fire career.
Yes, absolutely.
Bob Higgins, your thoughts?
My thoughts basically, and there's the same as the chief, is that after this happened, it became a learning experience, a very, very costly learning experience. But the way they fight now, like I said, I've been out 15 years, but I know fellas that are still in. I know some chiefs that, you know, I had worked with and all. they do a entirely different approach to fighting a refinery fire. Basically, we used to run in, set up our Stang gun, shoot water, and everything else. Now they wait at the gate. They proceed in with cautious. They set them up and then they move them back out. That's what they learned from this. And again, like I said, with these 8 firefighters, my point is I want the young guys to remember these guys. And I know they do. Like Brian says, they read the names. I taught at fire school for 3 classes, and it's great. But they should know the whole story of what happened down there. So this basically won't happen again.
Barry?
My thoughts, I had to put the microphone on. My thoughts, I ended up in staff for a couple years after this job, and eventually went back out to the field. And I was out in the field for maybe, I guess, 3 years, something like that. And I got a call from headquarters asking me if I would come down and take over the museum. And, I really wasn't sure that I wanted to do that for, time off reasons and different things, family reasons and stuff. And what I decided was that I would go down and I would try it out. I knew what the job entailed, but I would go down and I would try out the work and see how I felt about the whole thing. And I think that basically what the chief has said and what Bob has said, I kind of adapted my own thing of, teaching people about things and went into the point of, there were historians that were around at that time that And we were in print out research and print out information that was done about that job in particular. It's different. It's different. And what I decided was the work that went into the museum, the information that we were able to give to everybody else, and what we were able to do with it was worthy of that commitment. And I think, I don't think I have anything else to say. I think that's it.
Well said. But, gentlemen, one of the reasons for the Fire Museum, which we have to thank Joseph Rizzo for getting it going when he did, and the other volunteers, is so that the person at home realizes the sacrifices that have been made in the 200, almost 50 years now that have gone on with the Philadelphia Fire Department. And certainly this Gulf, and if you slash, say, Arco Refinery fire and play it 2 or 3 weeks ahead on that, was a historic moment for the city and for the fire department because of the number of alarms, because of the loss of life. There been very few that have been as consequential. So this is one little piece of the puzzle of what the Fire Museum is all about, to let people know the value of the men and women who serve the public as Philadelphia firefighters. So Bob and Harry, or Henry, whatever you want to be called tonight, we thank you very much for your time, and hopefully you brought some insight to people who didn't know about the valor of the Philadelphia Fire Department. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you very much.
Brian, that's what we do it.
Well, this will conclude.
Just like your kitchen table.
Yeah, well, this will conclude. I'd like to thank my panel for joining us and giving your expression of what happened. I know for some of you this is very difficult. Terry, thank you for moderating this great panel, and it's been my honor. And we're going to keep bringing content like this to our YouTube channel, so please tune in, subscribe, and like, and leave comments below. For those watching at home, thank you, and have a good night.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you for joining us today to honor these fallen firefighters and remembering their legacy and service to this city. I would like to thank all my guests for sharing with us their own personal accounts To view more content like this, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit the notification button and the like button to be alerted of the latest videos. I'll see you on the next one.